Hello and welcome to Star USA Training. Today is August 20th. It's Tuesday, 2021. We're recording this webinar. The recording and other materials will be made available after the broadcast. All participants are currently muted and the question and answer feature is available. If you have any questions, you can type those in. I'll answer questions throughout and I'll take more at the end. There is one CCS credit that stands for, I believe, Certified Customs Specialist. You can email train@starusa.org after the webinar with the email address you have that's registered with the NCBFAA. That's the agency that administers the CCS, CES, MCS, and a whole other number of programs that show proficiency in customs activities. We have a joke here at Star USA about how no one intends to work in this field. We all sort of stumble into it. I stumbled into it when I moved to Ohio over a decade ago. I took a short-term data entry job that morphed into a long-term job that covered data entry, audit, and software development assistance while I was going to school for my master's degree in social work. I worked in that field for a while and now I'm back at Star USA. I worked at the beginning on import activity audit and then assistance with the customs broker course administrative elements. I personally love a challenge, and when I heard that the test has very low pass rates, I decided to take it. I took the course and the test. I passed them both, and then I started managing clients, then staff, and finally regulatory integrity. I'm a big nerd and I like making complex pieces fit together, but you don't have to be any of those things to benefit from having a broker's license. We are a company, we're located here in Northeast Ohio, but we have clients all over the world. We do consulting, advice, training, as well as direct services for trade and compliance. Our next customs broker prep course starts August 5th. We'll talk some more about the details of that course at the end of the webinar. Some of the elements we're going to talk about today are getting your license and why that's beneficial, how to get your license, what you can expect on the exam, 8 tips for passing, and some details on our prep course. Once again, we are holding a giveaway for a free seat in the prep course, so make sure you stick around till the end of the webinar for details on how to enter to win. So one of the biggest things is that you're credentialed and you can prove the knowledge that you have. There are less than 15,000 active licensed customs brokers in the US, and it makes you a lot more valuable to your employer. They can go to customs and prove that they're dedicated to doing it correctly by having someone on staff who's knowledgeable. And it also shows that you're ambitious, you care about your career, and you want to keep moving as you go. Generally, if you have a license that is that proof of knowledge, you can pull in some higher income. Average US salary is around $75,000. And that varies depending on the state you live in and your cost of living. But in general, it allows you to see and recognize higher paychecks. If there's currently 15,000 active brokers and there are a projected 120,000 job openings, that shows that there's a pretty high demand for this profession. So you are stepping into a wide open field. There's so much going on with customs, especially in the last few years, that it becomes almost a requirement for a company that's doing international business to have a knowledgeable broker working directly with them. So your first step is to decide that you're going to be a broker. Write down why. I'm going to tell you right now, it's pretty intense. If you take a prep course, that's pretty intense and you might feel like it's not worth it. But then you go to take the exam and you're going to be very grateful that you did. So for now, make yourself a list that you can look at during the dark nights while you're working on homework after a long day of work, and think about why you're doing it. Think about why you wouldn't do it, and start getting people who will cheer you on. Know some other students who are also working toward this. Get yourself a support system. You're going to need those motivations later. We really recommend a prep course, whether it's hours or not. The exam is only offered twice a year. It has an extremely high fail rate, and it's intentionally designed that way. So if you can only take it twice a year, you need to be prepared for that. Otherwise, you have to wait 6 months to take it again. Prep courses are usually 3 to 6 months long. You want to have a course that has on-demand lessons that are kept current with the regulations and the HTS. You should have available some live sessions with the instructors so you can ask questions. There should be handouts and resources, a lot of homework and practice tests, a good final exam and review of that so you can identify what you missed and why, as well as some group discussions, because sometimes your peers can ask questions that you didn't even realize you had that can reframe the way you thought about things in a very helpful way. You have to be a US citizen to take the exam. You also have to be at least 18 and you can't be a government employee. So there's several hoops that have to be jumped through that are not all time related. And you don't want to be spinning your wheels or losing time on that. Get your resources. So this is an open book, open note exam, and you can take any written materials you want. You may not take electronic devices. You will be tested on the HTS US 19 CFR or the customs broker regulations. The instructions to prep the CBP form 7501, which is the entry form, various customs directives, and the ACE business rules and process document. Now, Customs has put together an electronic version of the references within the exam. 2 versions ago, those references crashed the test every time people tried to use them. This last test, they worked fairly well, which is good. But you still want to be very familiar with the references, and it's easier to do that if you have been working with a set of references the whole way through. I personally use the resources that I developed during the CB course at least weekly, and not on prepping the customs broker course. I use them in my day-to-day job. And if you are employed as a customs broker, you will too. So building that familiarity isn't only for the test, it's something that you'll use every day, and taking the time to build yourself a really solid set of references is going to benefit you both on the exam and in your career. Then step 4 is study. You will spend most of your free time studying, and that's when you want to come back to your reasons to stay motivated. The exam is 80 questions, and you are being tested on, if you stack the references that you're being tested on, you're being tested on over a foot of small print, 8.5 by 11 page references. So you need to be familiar enough with all of that that you can either answer it from your brain or much better, quickly flip to that section or look it up on the electronic references and answer. So studying is very important. Then you need to register for the exam. Customs will post the notice of examination on their website, and you should apply online. You have to apply online no later than 30 days before the exam date. You have to pay $390 to apply, and that is not refunded to you if you fail the exam. Now that the exam is not being administered by Customs, it's being administered by testing companies like Pearson VUE. There's a couple components of registration. First, you go in and you sign up for the exam with Customs. And then that testing agency is going to allow you to select your site. And that's usually a couple of days to a week later that site selection opens. Step 6, you're going to take the exam. And it's a little weird. I know that testing your guide to passing the exam, step 6 is taking the exam, but you will have follow-up options, requirements. This is an electronic exam that's given at those contracted testing sites that I mentioned, and it usually occurs on the 4th Wednesday in April and October. This year, it's happening on Thursday, October 21st. That is the next exam. Then you're going to wait for your results. I recommend while you test writing down your answers or your references. You will not be allowed to bring a copy of the test out with you, but they will give you a printout of your answers when you leave. You can compare those answers to the exam key, to the exam that Customs usually posts on their website within a week or two of the exam. Now, they don't post the answers yet, they just post the exam. And then you can go in and review the question and compare your answer. About a month after the test, Customs will post their answer key, and sometime shortly after that, you will get your answers. Now, Customs usually intends to post the exam the day after the test, and they intend to post the answers the week after. But in my experience, it takes a little bit longer. And if you don't pass the exam, but you're within a question or two, you can prepare a protest to help you remember why you answered the way you did and argue to Customs that their answer is incorrect and yours is the best answer. We will take the exam ourselves, and so do other companies that administer prep courses, and then we will post what our answers are, and you can compare your answers to those and generally have a very good idea whether or not you passed. Step 8, you're going to submit a broker's license application. You have to be 21 and a citizen to apply for a license. Now, you only had to be 18 to pass the exam, but you have to be 21 to get a license. So you have 3 years after passing the exam to get your license. You apply, pay $200 and get some fingerprints and have an interview with the port, and you'll pay for that fingerprint and those processing fees. Depending on the port, it can be anywhere between $10 and $50 or so. Some of the ports we hear are having some delays in processing those license applications because they're just very, very busy. And that's tricky and you can't do anything about it, unfortunately. Your local port is going to be your best bet. But again, if you're going, you're going to be moving and the port where you currently live is one of those really slow ports, you can instead apply to the port where you're going to be moving to. Then you will complete the license application process. There's multiple levels of review. Many agencies are going to look at your background. The port director will take a look at that background investigation. They'll evaluate you, they'll interview you. Having an arrest or a conviction doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get a license. And having bad credit doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get a license. I know that a lot of people become very intimidated when they see that they need to include a credit report. But what Customs is specifically looking for is whether there's evidence of fraud or theft. They want to make sure that you're not going to endanger the US economy. They usually try to issue licenses within 6 months of applying, but sometimes it can be tricky and take longer if they have to come back to you to get anything for the application, if your application was incomplete, or if you've lived in a huge number of different locations, that can take a little bit longer. They say to include character references, but no one I know has ever had those character references contacted. I have acted as a character reference a number of times and never been contacted either. Then celebrate. Once you have your license, you have done it. You have successfully become a customs broker. And then you're going to need to maintain that license. Every 3 years, there is a triennial status report that has to be given to Customs in order to keep that license current. And those years are the same for everyone. So 2021 was a year, 2024 will be the next year the triennial report is due, and then 2027. And you should also stay current on what Customs regulations are doing and how that's changing. So, for example, Customs is talking about requiring continuing education units each year instead of just requiring the triennial report. You need to make sure that you're fulfilling any of those requirements as they go. The exam is 80 questions. Those questions are all multiple choice, no essays, which is good for some of us and bad for some of us. The exam is 4.5 hours, and in order to pass, you have to have 60 or more questions correct. That's 75%. Another way to say that is you can miss 20 questions and still be okay. It's given twice a year, October and April, and it's open book. You cannot bring in electronic references or indeed any outside electronics to the exam, but you can use their built-in electronic references. And I hear the search function on those got much better last year. And if you don't pass the exam, there's no limit on how many times you can take it. $400 isn't super fun to pay to take the exam multiple times, but if it's going to impact your life that much for the better to have a license, then go for it. But you can probably save yourself some money by doing some really solid studying, taking a bunch of practice exams, and then being able to pass the exam within a few tries. Topics covered are entry, classification, trade agreements, valuation, broker compliance, power of attorney marking, drawbacks, bonds, FTZs and warehouses, intellectual property rights, and then fines, penalties, and forfeitures. And they've also added a new section that covers ACE. The exam's hard. Pass rate is around 15%. Some sessions it's 30%, some sessions it's less than 2%. So it may not be you, it may be the exam that you took just by chance. If there are around 2,600 people that take the exam each year, that means that less than 400 pass the exam, but you can pass if you prepare properly. So, first tip for passing the exam is get familiar with the material, but don't try to memorize it. Don't waste your time memorizing. There's way too much material. I mean, your references, I'm not kidding when I say when you stack them on the table, they're more than a foot high. There's too much. Even if you have a photographic memory, you're still going to be pressed to read it all and memorize it all. We recommend reviewing past exams to learn what kinds of questions are asked the most and where you find the answers to those. If you get really familiar with 75% of the questions and references, you're going to pass the exam. Then organize your material. That helps you save time on the exam, find very quickly what you're looking for. We include in our material package a catalog rack with tabs and labels because we have found that to be extremely beneficial in sorting through quickly and identifying. Be really strategic with highlighting. Don't highlight everything, but it is helpful to have a code that you yourself know and follow that. I didn't really color code when I highlighted, but I did highlight every single heading in the HTS. And once you start looking at the paper HTS, you can see why, because they can just blur in to the text and it can be hard to jump from heading to heading. And I also highlighted the most frequently questioned parts of the regs, as well as the parts that I tended to get wrong so that I knew how to quickly find them. Practice classifying items. Classification is the largest part of the exam. It's usually right around 18 questions. So you want to fully understand and memorize the 6 general rules of interpretation that are at the beginning of the HTS general notes, as well as be familiar and comfortable with the section and chapter notes that are in the HTS to help you identify whether the item is excluded or included. And then you can also use some of those informed compliance publications for details on how to classify specific categories like textiles, metals, machinery, etc. You should also understand key valuation rules. The valuation section of the exam is pretty small, but those concepts go into other categories like the practical exercises and entry. And customs tends to focus on transaction value, assists, and fees when it comes to value. Next big one, be super comfortable with the 7501. That's the entry form, and you should bring the instruction sheet with you. Be really confident in what everything on that instruction sheet means and know what goes in each of those blanks, because usually the questions will show you a picture of a partially filled out 7501 and they'll ask you to fill in the blanks, or they will ask you, to make inferences based on the information that you have. You don't have to study every single day, but having a long-term bank of knowledge in your head and that repetition of doing it for many, many weeks makes a huge difference. Cramming the night before can kind of scramble your brain a little bit and make it trickier. But if you have months of having read the same thing, it wears a groove in your mind that you can follow and be confident in when you go into test. Take the practice exams. Customs will post every past exam and answers to the public. Right now, they only have the last, I think, 5 exams on their website. And really, we recommend mainly using the exams from the past few years because regs change, HTS change, and you don't really want to be confident in old regulations. You want to be confident in what you're tested on today. Our course includes all of the past exams from the past 5 years, and we also update the questions so that they're testing on current regs. And then join a broker's prep course. I'm biased. I think ours is great, but there's other options out there as well. Ours is 13 weeks. It's online. It starts August 5th. This course has been taught for over 23 years. It's administered by licensed customs brokers who are experts in the field. It has a very organized course schedule with comprehensive practice tests that we structure like the exam. As soon as customs moved to electronic testing, we moved to electronic testing. That way you have a lot of practice testing the way you will on exam day. That's going to give you a lot of confidence. You have unlimited access to online versions of previous broker exams, study guides, quick reference guides, etc., as well as webinars that you can watch multiple times, live review sessions, interpreted materials, course material, over 4,000 past exam questions, as well as a lot of support and messaging. We use a messaging platform that allows you to reach out to instructor as well as your other co-students. Here's some student testimonials that it's comprehensive and a big necessity for implementing the regs and HTS in the workplace, as well as passing the exam, and recommended. Materials are not included with the course. We do have a materials package that has printed labels, tabs, catalog rack, and some other items to assist. We cover 3 pages, the next 3 slides of topics, things like customs bonds, powers of attorney, the structure of the HTS US, items that have been exported and returned, search and seizure, prior disclosures, temporary import bonds, duty liquidation, etc. So the package of materials includes the HTS that's printed, 19 CFR that's printed, instructions for preparation of 7501, the right to make entry directive, a printed copy of the ACE business rules and process document, section and chapter labels that are already printed, tab inserts, reference guides, Incoterms reference guide, the catalog stand, tabs and labels for your exam room binder, section and chapter summaries, and a transaction value chart. And this is an example of the binder, or not the binder, the catalog stand set up to go. So it sits on, it can fit on the desk with your computer and you'll be able to sort through it as you test. Here's how we stack up against some other popular customs broker exam prep courses. Ours isn't the cheapest, but it's the most comprehensive course on the market. And that's because we really care about your success for passing the exam as well as being a solid broker. We give you access to the course until you pass the exam. If for some reason you weren't able to dedicate all your study time that you want to, you can retake the course. If you had a personal event come up in your life that prevented you from being able to test, you can retake the course. If you're not great at testing, you get a lot of practice as you take the course, but for some reason you don't pass, you can retake the course. We use Slack as a members only community and chat platform. And the course has 20 CCS credits available through the NCBFAA, which is all you need for a year of accreditation for CCS. So if you take the course, you pass, you get your license, you can also get accreditation with the NCBFAA. Deadline to register is August 4th. All right, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, for the first time, not for the first time, this is our second time, holding a contest where someone can receive the course for free. One winner will be randomly chosen. We will announce that on July 26th. So you have through the weekend to go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel and comment on a video. The winner will receive free access to the course. The material package is not included, so that will need to be purchased separately. And it's open to new students and not those that are currently registered in the course. This webinar is approved for 1 CCS credit. Make sure you email train@starusa.org within the next week to receive credit. I will take some questions now. So you cannot be a government employee, and the military is part of the government. If you are in the military, you cannot take the customs broker exam. You can prep for it, but you cannot take the exam. Question on whether or not you can take prior tests and answers to the exam. Yes, you can. And we have had students who have taken old tests and answers to the exam. And I will tell you that there's probably 2 or 3 questions on the exam that are repeated questions from previous tests. But usually what you want to do instead is get really familiar with the regulations themselves and therefore be able to answer it instead of having to go back and flip through old exams. Now, if that works for your brain, absolutely do that. There is no limit on the amount of references that you can bring in to the exam. They do limit the size of the carry item that you can bring in, but you can go back out to your locker and bring in more references. So if that's the way your brain works, go for it. But because the test is timed, you don't want to spend a lot of time flipping through references. You want to be able to have an idea of where it is and find that. For the comments, probably don't just type in first, but really you can just either ask a question, you could respond to something in the video. You can just let us know that you're commenting to be entered in the drawing. Nothing specific that we're looking for. All right. So you may pass the prep course, and by that I mean you have gone in, and generally we only see people pass the prep course but not pass the exam if they have something intense happen in their personal life the night before the exam that just kind of throws them off their game. It's pretty rare. So that does happen, and when that happens, we want to honor that and allow people to stay up to date on what's going on up until the next exam comes. It could also be that someone is really, really, really terrible at exam day testing, and that's okay. Sometimes you just have to do it a couple of times. Before the pandemic, we often encouraged people to go take your weekly tests at a coffee shop or the library or somewhere like that, where you can replicate the feeling of, okay, I'm going to pack all my stuff up. I'm going to unpack it in this strange place, and I'm going to answer my questions in this time limit. If you go 5 hours before closing, then you only have 5 hours to get everything answered and submit it. And that gets you in the practice of testing in a different environment. And it builds your confidence in not only the material that you're learning, but also in electronic testing in a place that isn't your office or your home, where you naturally feel pretty comfortable and confident. So those are things that we recommend. Definitely do what is safe and convenient for you to do as you go. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up? I'm going to stop the recording